What's up, people? Welcome to the video and welcome back, members of the Tang Gang. I'm Tangy Nacho, and today we have the recap of Overwatch League Season 2, Stage 3, Week 1. Before we get into the recap though, I want to let you guys know that right now I am streaming over on my Twitch channel. My friend Dylan and I are doing a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Yellow. If you don't know what a Nuzlocke is, I'll be explaining it at the end of this video, but it's going to be super fun and super chill. I'd love to chat with you guys about the Overwatch League or anything. Just come through and hang out. It's going to be a blast. Link to my Twitch channel is in the description. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into the recap. As predicted, the meta is largely the same as Stage 2, which is pretty unfortunate if you're sick of the GOATS meta like I am, but that doesn't mean we didn't get some super hype matches regardless. First up was the San Francisco Shock versus the Atlanta Reign. Atlanta shocked the world when they won against the San Francisco Shock on Ilios 2-1 to start the match. They got first held on Paris and lost 1-0, but then they came out with a 2-1 victory on Hollywood. The Reign were up 2-1 against the San Francisco Shock, the champions of Stage 2. I thought this was gonna be a huge upset. I was ready to tweet out about the Atlanta Reign being the Giant Slayers, killing all the best teams in the league after beating New York twice last stage. They were not able to close it out on Gibraltar and lost 5-4 in a really close match, and the Shock forced Game 5 on Oasis. And unfortunately, that's where dreams of the massive upset died, because San Francisco Shock won the map 2-0 and ended up winning the series 3-2. I was hoping that Baby Bay was going to be able to beat his old team in the San Francisco Shock, but despite a really impressive showing, they couldn't quite finish it off. After a really close and exciting match, we went into the Florida Mayhem and Seoul Dynasty, which turned out to be the exact opposite. Seoul won 2-0 on Oasis, 2-1 on Paris, 3-2 on Hollywood, and 2-1 on Havana to win the match 4-0. True to their name, the Florida Mayhem are a chaotic mess, but I do give them credit for taking a few points on a couple of the maps. Seoul was looking really solid, but it could just be because they were against one of the worst teams in the league, so we can't really say much about their performance here. But I guess they didn't choke, so at least there's that. Then we had the Guangzhou Charge versus the Chengdu Hunters. I expected this one to be pretty close, and honestly, despite the final score, all the maps were pretty close. First on Oasis, Guangzhou Charge won 2-0, but then on Volskaya they won 5-4, a very close match. Eichenwald was a similar story, but Guangzhou won 6-5 to clinch the series, and on Dorado the Hunters were able to take a map 3-2, so they lost 3-1. This matchup is kinda always gonna be a toss-up for me, but I'm glad to see Guangzhou showing some fight and taking some wins early in the stage. Then we had the Los Angeles Valiant versus the Shanghai Dragons. Shanghai took Oasis 2-0, Paris 4-3, and Numbani 3-0 to clinch the match. On the fourth map, Gibraltar, Los Angeles was able to get a 1-0 victory, but it didn't matter. Shanghai still won 3-1. It looks like the time off in the mid-season wasn't enough for the Valiant to get used to using their new main tank Fact Fiction. And to be honest, I'm not sure the main tank slot was their problem in the first place, but that's a discussion for another time. Shanghai played really solid and they definitely deserved the win. Moving on, we got the Paris Eternal versus Toronto Defiant. Ilios went pretty much as I would expect, Toronto Defiant 2-0, but then on Paris was able to win 1-0, and I mean, it's their home map, so I guess they should be winning, right? And then they surprised me again on Hollywood, winning 2-1, and Havana 3-2 to clinch the series 3-1. I was very impressed to see the Paris Eternal take the win here against a team that's pretty much even to them in terms of skill, in my opinion, maybe even a little better. So good job, Paris. As for Toronto, it's kind of the same situation as the LA Valiant. They have a new tank line and they're probably still getting used to playing on stage with them. All things considered, it was a very close match. All the maps were decided by 1 point except for the first map. Next up was the Boston Uprising versus the London Spitfire. And man, was this a disappointment. Maybe it's just my Boston bias showing, but I actually thought the Uprising had a decent shot at taking this one. I couldn't have been more wrong, as the Spitfire absolutely plowed through their competition. London won every single map, taking Oasis 2-0, Horizon 1-0, Eichenwald 2-1, and finally Dorado 2-1. A 4-0 loss does not look good for a middle-of-the-line team like Boston Uprising that already has a subpar map differential. If you're a London fan though, this was a really good match because they showed utter dominance over a team that's in the middle of the pack. Boston was playing with a new support line and it was clear that it was not working out. While I do think Alamau may be an improvement over Calyx, they need Aim God on this roster. And then we had the Houston Outlaws versus the New York Excelsior. Now I expected this to be an absolute stomp for New York, but after taking Ilios 2-1, the Houston Outlaws looked like they actually would be able to stand up to this behemoth. It seemed like the 0-7 Houston Outlaws from last stage was gone for good, but then they got first held on Horizon Lunar Colony, which kinda sucked, and New York won 1-0, and they pushed back again on Numbani, winning 4-3 and going on match point. Once again, just like the Shock Atlanta game, they went to Gibraltar, and New York Excelsior, the favorite team, won 4-3, forcing a game 5 on Oasis. I wanted so badly for Houston Outlaws to take this victory here. It would have been huge for their morale, but unfortunately, New York Excelsior won 2-0 on Oasis, taking the match 3-2. The Outlaws were playing Jake and Linkser, going for more DPS heavy play, and I really thought that was a good choice. We've all known for a long time now that GOATS is not the Outlaws thing, so they should be focusing on their somber play, and it looks like that's what they're doing. On the New York side of things, they had a shaky match to say the least and got lucky with their victory here. Here's hoping the Outlaws don't take this loss too hard and don't go on another 0-7 stage. Next up was the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the other Texan team, the Dallas Fuel. I expected this to be one of the closer matches of the week, both teams looking to solidify themselves as a top tier threat. I even went as far as predicting Dallas Fuel would win, but unfortunately I could not have been more wrong. The Los Angeles Valiant took Oasis 2-0 and then Paris 2-0 to go into the half up 2-0. The Fuel needed to bounce back and bounce back hard, and they kind of showed some life on Hollywood, but they still end up losing 3-2 and then lost on Havana 3-1 to lose the entire match 4-0. After their performance last stage and this performance in their first match of Stage 3, I think we can safely say that the Los Angeles Gladiators have reached that point that we all expected them to be at the beginning of the season. I think I predicted the Gladiators to be like second place in the league or something, and at first they didn't have Decay and it took them a while to get used to playing with Roar and everybody, but once they did, they have been popping off. At the same time though, Dallas Fuel has looked really good too, especially after their pickup of note. It just wasn't their night, I guess, and they took a hard loss to the LA Valiant. Next up was the Hangzhou Spark versus the Philadelphia Fusion. And again, I expected this to be a very close match, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The Fusion honestly just looked lost throughout this whole set. Spark took Oasis 2-0, Paris 2-1, Eichenwald 3-0, and Gibraltar 3-2 for the 4-0 sweep. The Fusion just couldn't seem to bring it together to get anything done in this match. The Spark though, they are looking incredibly powerful, one of the fastest growing teams in the league I think, and it's especially impressive with Gushue, the Chinese main tank, with the rest of his team being all Korean. I give props to the Hangzhou Spark. I think they're definitely going to be playoff contenders this season. But moving on to our next match, we had the Vancouver Titans versus the Atlanta Reign. The Reign had an absolutely awful schedule this week, and it was actually really impressive that they didn't get completely slaughtered in either of their matches. They faced off against the Stage 2 winners and then the Stage 1 winners right afterward. Against the Titans, they lost 2-0 on Nepal, then they won 3-2 on Paris to tie it up going into the half. Their ability to take maps off the highest tier teams is impressive as hell, and I was thinking they might actually be able to take the upset here. But the Vancouver Titans won 1-0 on Hollywood and clinched the series in a super close match on Gibraltar 6-5 to take the series 3-1. As a Vancouver fan, I can't say I'm disappointed with the results, but you always want to see that upset, and the Atlanta Reign has come so close so many times. I can't wait to see them face off against worse teams later this stage. But after that, we had the Seoul Dynasty versus the Guangzhou Charge. And remember how Seoul Dynasty beat the Florida Mayhem and I said it wasn't that impressive because it was the Florida Mayhem? Well, they did the exact same thing basically to the Guangzhou Charge. First up was Oasis and Seoul won 2-0. Then it was Paris, Seoul won 2-0 again. They won Hollywood 3-1 and Dorado 3-1 for the 4-0 stomp. As the scoreboard suggests, the Seoul Dynasty played extremely well in this match. They only let up 2 points in the entire match. And this makes the Charge's win over the Hunters even more important because when they come up against harder teams like this, it's good to have wins against the more middle of the line teams under your belt. And speaking of the Hunters, the next match was the Los Angeles Valiant versus the Chengdu Hunters. And Chengdu would have loved to have that win against Guangzhou because they got absolutely rammed in this match. That's right, the Los Angeles Valiant actually got a win, guys. They took Oasis 2-0, Horizon Lunar Colony 5-4, Numbani 5-3, and Havana 3-2 for the 4-0 victory. This is the Los Angeles Valiant that we have been waiting to see since the end of Season 1. It's not really fair to say this was a slaughter because Chengdu definitely did put up a good fight, sending a lot of the maps into extra rounds, but unfortunately it wasn't enough and they end the week 0-2. They had a Meng out on most of the maps, which is questionable. I guess they wanted to give their subs some playtime, and I mean a Meng's not the best main tank in the league, but they definitely need him I think. Underestimate the Los Angeles Valiant and they will hit you hard. Moving on to the next match, we had the New York Excelsior versus the London Spitfire. The two giants from early Season 1 were facing off and I was super excited to see it. New York took Ilios 2-0 and Horizon Lunar Colony 1-0 going into the half up 2-0. I was a little concerned, but I had faith in the London Spitfire's clutch potential. Unfortunately, Hollywood went 4-3 for New York, and then Havana went 3-0 for New York, ending the match New York Excelsior 4-0. After the first half, the Spitfire took out Quartermain and put Nuts back in, but it wasn't enough to bring them back. And after a tight win against the Houston Outlaws, New York really needed this one to boost their confidence. Next up was the Paris Eternal versus the Boston Uprising. And once again, Paris Eternal actually really impressed me. Boston came out with an early lead with 2-0 on Ilios, but then Paris won on their signature map 5-4, won on Eichenwald on 3-2, and clinched the series on Gibraltar 4-3 for the 3-1 victory. Paris played two pretty even teams this week and they were able to get the wins. This one was incredibly close. Boston won the first map and then the rest of the maps were only decided by 1 point. But at the end of the day, no matter how many points you score on a map, it all comes down to who actually wins, and Boston's map differential is going to suffer even more from this. I'm disappointed to see the Boston Uprising in the bottom half of the league right now, but I have confidence that they'll be able to bring it back going into the rest of the stage. The next match was the Washington Justice versus the Dallas Fuel, and I actually predicted this one correct. The score was 3-0 for the Dallas Fuel. I predicted a tie and they actually got one. Dallas won Oasis 2-0, and then the draw happened on Volskaya 4-4, super close match, then 3-2 on Eichenwald for Dallas Fuel, and finally 3-0 on Havana for Dallas Fuel. As I said, they won 3-0. This was a much easier opponent for Dallas than the Gladiators, and it definitely showed. The Washington Justice, on the other hand, have got to get their shit together. I mean, the Fuel is a pretty solid team, but you gotta do better than just one draw. Your map differential cannot afford it. I was hoping the Justice would finally show some life in this one, but unfortunately that did not happen. And lastly, we had the Vancouver Titans versus the Los Angeles Gladiators. And it's kind of crazy to think that the LA Gladiators made such easy work of the Dallas Fuel earlier in the week, and then the Vancouver Titans come in and make pretty easy work of them. It wasn't as one-sided, and the LA Gladiators did take a map, but I mean, it's just so crazy that the teams can be so different in power level. On Ilios, the Vancouver Titans won 2-0, then LA Gladiators struck back 3-2, Hollywood went 2-1 for Vancouver Titans. The Gladiators had such an awful C9. I don't know if they would have been able to win anyway because Vancouver had a lot of time to move it only a few inches, but still, you hate to see it. And then the Gladiators couldn't force a game 4 and they lost on Gibraltar 3-0. A tough loss for the LA Gladiators, but what are you gonna do? The Titans actually don't lose in the regular season game. And that brings us to this week, so I'm gonna go ahead and do my predictions real quick. First up is the San Francisco Shock versus the Houston Outlaws, 3-1 San Francisco. Then we have Shanghai Dragons versus Atlanta Reign, 3-1 again for Atlanta. Dallas Fuel versus Chengdu Hunters, 3-2 Dallas Fuel. Hangzhou Spark versus Vancouver Titans. This one may actually be an upset. I think if anybody has a chance to beat the Titans, it's the super high rising Hangzhou Spark, but I'm gonna make the safe bet and say 3-2 Vancouver Titans. Paris Eternal versus New York Excelsior, 4-0 New York. London Spitfire versus Toronto Defiant, 3-1 London Spitfire. Boston Uprising versus Houston Outlaws. I hope this is a close match. These are my two favorite teams. I'm gonna say 3-2 Boston Uprising. LA Gladiators versus Philadelphia Fusion, 3-1 LA Gladiators. Washington Justice versus Hangzhou Spark, 4-0 Hangzhou. Seoul Dynasty versus Atlanta Reign, 3-2 Seoul. Dallas Fuel versus Vancouver Titans, 3-1 Vancouver. Guangzhou Charge versus LA Valiant, 3-2 LA Valiant. San Francisco Shock versus Seoul Dynasty, 3-2 Seoul Dynasty. Florida Mayhem versus Paris Eternal, 4-0 Paris. Philly Fusion versus Boston Uprising, 3-2 Philly. And lastly, Washington Justice versus LA Gladiators, 4-0 LA Gladiators. And that does it for the recap and the predictions. Thanks so much for sticking around for the whole video. Don't forget, I am streaming on Twitch right now. Come and hang out with me and my friend Dylan at twitch.tv/TangyNacho88. And for those of you who don't know what a Pokemon Nuzlocke is, I'll go over the rules real quick. Basically, every Pokemon you'll encounter in the game is randomized. That means your starters, the wild Pokemon, the trainer Pokemon, everything is completely random. So as you can imagine, it gets pretty crazy when some unexpected Pokemon start showing up. The next rule of a Nuzlocke is you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter on a given route. After that, you cannot make any captures on that route, and if you don't catch it, you don't get a Pokemon for that route at all. That means you have a very limited supply of Pokemon, and there's a lot of luck involved as well. But what makes a Nuzlocke the most challenging is when a Pokemon dies, you have to permanently put it in your PC box and you can never use it again. Basically, it's permadeath in Pokemon. And to make it even worse, you have to nickname all your Pokemon to make you get that emotional connection. So as viewers of the challenge, you'll be able to help us nickname the Pokemon among other choices. The goal is just to complete the game with all this randomness going on. We're starting off with Pokemon Yellow because it's kind of the ultimate game from Generation 1, then we'll move on to Generation 2 with Pokemon Crystal, etc, etc. It's gonna be a long-lasting series and we plan on streaming every Wednesday around 6:30 Eastern, just like this one, right after I post my recaps, and I will be posting the VODs over here on my channel if you can't catch it live. Anyway, make sure you drop a like on this video if you enjoyed the recaps, comment below with your thoughts on my predictions and what you think is going to happen with the rest of Stage 3 in Overwatch League. Of course, subscribe to join the Tang Gang if you haven't already, and until we meet again, later people!